Iran remains a mysterious place to many of us. In Western media, it's often portrayed as an alien world defined solely by Islamic law and populated by people who supposedly hate America. Yet we rarely hear an Iranian perspective what ordinary Iranians actually think or experience during these events. That's where Persepolis comes in. Based on the graphic memoir by Marjane Satrapi, which draws from her own life, in which, fun fact, actually did meet her when she hosted a seminar at a local university several years back. Persepolis is an animated film that presents a deeply personal and unique perspective. Today I'll be discussing both the film and the historical events that inspired it. So join me today as I go into this exquisite movie and give you the historical context behind it. And it will also give you context on current events that are going on. Before we dive right in, if you like the video, please like, share, and comment on it. Also be sure to subscribe to the channel for more videos like this. And finally, please hit the bell button down below, that way when a new video comes out, you'll be notified. Now then, without further ado, let's see what we're getting ourselves into. The film follows the story of Marjane Satrapi herself, beginning with her childhood. She's an ordinary young girl obsessed with Bruce Lee and dreaming of becoming a prophet. Okay, not really an ordinary young girl, but hey, still pretty cool. Still, her life feels relatively normal at first, but everything changes with the outbreak of the Iranian Revolution. As political unrest grows, Marjane's family becomes involved in the revolution, and Marjane herself eagerly wants to participate, much to her family's concern. However, once Iran becomes an Islamic republic, life begins to change for the worse. Women are forced to wear veils, social freedoms disappear, and activities like partying and drinking alcohol can lead to arrest or even execution. And Marjane's uncle Anush, who is a political dissident, becomes a victim of the new regime. The situation worsens further when Iraq invades Iran, bringing bombing raids and the constant fear of war. Meanwhile, Marjane grows increasingly rebellious, openly criticizing the government at school. Fearing for her safety, her family sends her to Europe to escape both the war and political repression. There she struggles to fit in but begins her journey into adulthood. Ultimately, her time abroad proves difficult and she returns home to Iran, forced to confront who she is and what she wants from her life. So what do I like about Persepolis? For starters, the animation and character design. The film stays faithful to the graphic novel's art style, but the animation allows it to feel far more alive. Movements are fluid, expressive, and occasionally exaggerated in ways that really enhance the storytelling. Especially when it comes to facial expressions. I mean, just look at these evil grins right here. I love it. Also, major apologies for this scene right here.
I got one question for you. What are those?
The backgrounds also deserve praise. They strike a balance between simplicity and detail, and at times even resembling ancient Persian artwork. The silhouette sequences in particular carry an eerie yet beautiful quality that perfectly matches the film's tone. And there's even a classic detail where we see a present Marjane and when that comes out is in color, but when it's in the past, it's black and white. The story itself is equally strong. We watch Marjane grow from a carefree child into a young woman shaped by revolution, war, exile, and identity. The film shifts tones effortlessly from the warmth of childhood to the brutality of war to the moments of deep loneliness and reflection. At times, the movie simply pauses in silence, allowing emotion and atmosphere to speak for themselves. It's calm, haunting, and genuinely beautiful. Marjane is also an incredibly relatable protagonist. Despite her specifically Iranian upbringing, her experiences feel universal. Honestly, I connected with her a lot. As a kid, I went through my own phase obsessing over Marjane's anime like Dragon Ball Z and Naruto, watched countless Godzilla movies. What am I talking about? I still do that today. My family was into politics and I had an uncle who I really admired a lot. And I'll admit, I did thought about joining the priesthood to spread the word of God. Much like young Marge, I wanted to be a prophet. Though some would argue I am still doing that just in my own way with these videos. And I've had my fair share of shitty relationships. And I'll admit this, but I've also dated people who weren't so interested in the opposite sex.
Thanks to you, I realized something about myself. If it doesn't work with you, it can't with any woman. I'm homosexual. Ah, it feels so good to say it. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Trust me, girl, I've been there. And when she's in Austria, she does experience culture shock, with some customs she's getting used to and others not so much.
Mr. Custer's Green! Mr. Custer's Green!
Through her perspective, we experience history on a deeply personal level. That being said, there are moments where she isn't always likable. And she has moments where she makes serious mistakes, such as bullying a kid whose father was loyal to the Shah, denying her Iranian heritage to fit in, and falsely accusing an innocent man of sexual harassment to avoid the police. Importantly, the film does hold her accountable, especially through the guidance of her mother. As for the negatives, the film struggles with a common issue found in many book adaptations: its pacing. Because the original graphic novel spans 2 large volumes while the film runs only 90 minutes, certain story elements had to be condensed or removed. Some characters are silent, including figures who played larger roles in the comics, such as Marjane's Austrian roommate who helped her adjust to life abroad. Portions of her relationship with her parents are reduced, although her bond with her grandmother is expanded, and honestly, that's one of the film's strongest improvements. Her group of friends in Austria, which highlights the hypocrisies of Western society, received less development, and her difficult reintegration into Iranian life after returning from Europe feels somewhat rushed. Still, since Satrapi herself was heavily involved in the film's production, these choices were likely reflected personal decisions about how she wanted to tell her story. She has mentioned needing years to process her experiences before adapting them, so it's understandable that certain elements were emphasized over the others. Admittedly, this may be more noticeable for viewers like me who read the graphic novel first. Those experiencing the story slowly through the film may feel differently. Even so, Persepolis remains a powerful, thoughtful, and beautifully crafted film that I really highly recommend. Now we move on to the historical inspirations behind the film. While Persepolis is clearly shaped by the Iranian Revolution, the question is, how did Iran reach that point in the first place? But before we get into the history itself, I want to briefly talk about the film's title, Persepolis. At first, the name might seem unusual, but Persepolis was actually an ancient city in Iran that served as the ceremonial capital of the First Persian Empire. While it wasn't the empire's primary administrative capital, it was an important cultural and symbolic center where major celebrations and ceremonies were held. In 330 BCE, however, Alexander the Great and his Macedonian army invaded and destroyed the city, leaving only ruins behind. In many ways, this mirrors the story told in both the graphic novel and the film. Marjane's life begins with stability and promise, only for forces far beyond her control to shatter that world. With that context established, let's look at the historical events that inspired the film. Much like modern Iran, the country in the late 19th and early 20th centuries was heavily influenced by Islamic authority, while also facing growing foreign interference, particularly from the British Empire. Political unrest and resistance to foreign influence intensified throughout the early 20th century, culminating in a series of rebellions. In 1925, the existing monarchy was overthrown by a military officer named Reza Pahlavi. Inspired in part by the reform that followed the collapse of the Ottoman Empire and the rise of modern Turkey under Mustafa Kemal Atatürk, Pahlavi initially sought to modernize and strengthen Iran as a unified nation. However, British political and economic interests, especially access to Iranian oil, helped solidify his rule as monarch rather than Republican leader. So he would then be crowned Shah, or Emperor of Iran. Under Pahlavi's rule, Iran would actually pursue policies of modernization, but these reforms often benefited elites while enforcing an increasingly authoritarian regime. The film briefly explains this period through a stylized puppet show sequence, though many historical complexities are understandably condensed. Which is why I'm here, to explain those complexities. Reza Shah would rule until 1941. Although Iran declared neutrality during World War II, his government maintained sympathies towards Nazi Germany. He even kept an autographed picture of Adolf Hitler in his office. Weirdo. Considering Iran might align with Germany, Britain and the Soviet Union jointly invaded the country, occupying and dividing it to secure vital supply routes and resources. Reza Shah was forced into exile in South Africa, where he lived out the rest of his life. His son, Mohammad Reza Pahlavi, assumed the throne. After the war, British and Soviet forces drew troops from Iran, though the Soviets were notably more reluctant to leave. Following World War II, Iran briefly moved towards a more democratic system, becoming a constitutional monarchy. While the Shah remained on the throne, political leaders were now elected by the people. In 1951, Iranians elected Mohammad Mossadegh as prime minister. One of his most significant policies was the nationalization of Iran's oil industry, which has been long dominated by British interests. Unsurprisingly, this decision did not go well with the British. Initially, Britain sought American support to remove Mossadegh from power, but US President Harry Truman saw little reason to intervene and was generally sympathetic towards Iran's sovereignty. That changed in 1953 when Dwight D. Eisenhower became president. Amid growing Cold War tensions, Mossadegh was accused of being a communist even though he wasn't. Back then, if you were slightly left-wing, you were accused of being a dirty commie. Fearing Soviet influence in the region, the CIA, working alongside British intelligence, organized a coup to remove Mossadegh from office. The coup successfully reinstated Mohammad Reza Pahlavi as Shah, granting him expanded authority over the country. Mossadegh was placed under house arrest, where he remained until his death in 1967. In the years that followed, relations between the United States and Iran grew exceptionally close. Iran becomes one of America's key allies in the Middle East, serving as a strategic partner in containing Soviet influence during the Cold War. Even though Shah was backed by Western powers, he still faced a major challenge of winning over the Iranian people. Mohammad Mossadegh remained extremely popular, and his forced removal pissed off many Iranians. And many viewed the Shah as a Western puppet, which he was. So in an effort to gain legitimacy, the Shah adopted reformist ideas and introduced a series of modernization policies known as the White Revolution. These reforms aimed to transform Iran into a regional superpower through industrial expansion, land redistribution, infrastructure projects such as railway construction, and expanded rights for women, including the right to vote. However, these changes angered many powerful groups. Religious leaders saw the reforms as an attack on Islamic traditions, while wealthy landowners opposed land redistribution that threatened their influence. Despite presenting himself as a modernizer, the Shah ruled with an increasingly authoritarian grip. Critics of the regime would be jailed, exiled, tortured, and or killed. Among those exiled was a religious cleric by the name of Ayatollah Khomeini, who we'll talk more about later. Meanwhile, the Shah's secret police, the Savak, maintained widespread surveillance and repression, creating an atmosphere of fear throughout the country. Compounding these tensions, the benefits of the White Revolution increasingly favored the wealthy rather than ordinary Iranians. Public anger intensified following the deaths of two prominent opposition figures, socialist scholar Ali Shariati and Mustafa Khomeini, the son of the aforementioned Ruhollah, which again we'll get to in a moment. Many believe that it was the Shah's secret police that killed them. Rising inequality, political repression, and growing cooperation between leftist and Islamic opposition groups ultimately created the conditions that would ignite the Iranian Revolution. Around 1978, protests began spreading across Iran. At first, many demonstrations were relatively peaceful, but that changed on September 8, 1978, a day many Iranians remember as Black Friday. During a mass protest in Tehran, government forces opened fire on demonstrators, killing at least 88 people and wounding hundreds more, with some estimates place the number far higher. And we even see a brief glimpse of this moment depicted in the film with one of the silhouette scenes. Instead of suppressing the dissent, violence only intensified public anger. More Iranians joined the revolutionary movement, nationwide strikes broke out, and clashes between security forces and protesters became common. Desperate to maintain control, the Shah attempted limited political reforms, but at this point, many Iranians didn't want compromise, they wanted him gone. Enter the previously mentioned Ruhollah Khomeini, a prominent Muslim cleric and a longtime critic of the Shah's rule. Decades earlier, Khomeini had condemned the Shah's modernization policies and was forced into exile in 1964, spending years abroad, eventually settling in France. From there, he would continue to inspire opposition through speeches and recorded messages smuggled into Iran. When the revolution gained momentum, Khomeini emerged as a symbolic leader, uniting Islamists, leftists, and moderates under the promise that a new Iran would represent all its people, regardless of political or religious beliefs. On February 1st, 1979, Khomeini returned to Iran to massive public support. Just 10 days later, on February 11th, Shah Mohammad Reza Pahlavi abdicated the throne and fled the country. The Shah eventually entered the United States for medical treatment due to lymphoma, a decision that sparked outrage in Iran. So in response to this, on November 4th, 1979, Iranian students stormed the U.S. Embassy in Tehran, taking 66 Americans hostage in what would become known as the Iran hostage crisis, which the American hostages would not be freed until 1981. The diplomatic fallout forced the Shah to seek refuge elsewhere, and he ultimately settled in Egypt, where he died in 1980. In April 1979, Iranians voted to establish an Islamic Republic, and by December, Ruhollah Khomeini was declared the supreme leader. So, what happens next? So remember those promises of unity made during the revolution, that no matter what people believed in, they would be free? Yeah, it turns out that was a lie. Khomeini quickly secured power, imprisoning and executing many former allies, particularly secularists and moderates. Sharia law was implemented, banning alcohol and many social freedoms. Women's rights were rolled back, with mandatory head coverings and public spaces becoming increasingly gender segregated. And religious, ethnic, and sexual minorities faced growing persecution. And soon, revolutionary Iran would face yet another crisis, this time from beyond its borders. Around the same time Khomeini was taking power in Iran, events were unfolding to the west in neighboring Iraq. There, Saddam Hussein was maneuvering to seize full control of the Iraqi government from his mentor, President Ahmed Hassan al-Bakr, ultimately positioning himself as a dictator. Now, Iran and Iraq have never been the best of friends, with the rivalry going back thousands of years when they were the ancient empires of Mesopotamia and Persia respectively. Beyond history, the two nations also differed culturally, ethnically, and politically. Iraq's population was primarily Arab, while Iran's was predominantly Persian. Religiously, both countries had large Shia Muslim populations, but Iraq's ruling elite under Saddam Hussein was Sunni dominated. Some may be asking, well, what's the difference? Well, the Sunni Shia divide largely centers on differing beliefs on who should have succeeded the Prophet Muhammad after his death. There's a more complicated history, but that's the simple explanation for it. Throughout the 1970s, Iran and Iraq engaged in periodic border clashes with each other, but due to Iran's close alliance with the United States under the Shah, they discouraged any large-scale conflict. But with the Shah officially out, this changed everything. To Saddam Hussein, revolutionary Iran represented both an opportunity and a threat. A newly established Shia-led Islamic government on Iraq's border raised fear that Iraq's own Shia population might rebel against his rule. At the same time, Saddam sought control over the oil-rich Iranian province of Khuzestan, claiming he was defending Arab populations there from oppression. Yeah, it's not like I've heard that one before. Believing Iran to be weakened by revolution and internal chaos, Hussein ordered an invasion in September 1980, much against the advice of his generals. The plan was a swift victory that would topple Iran's new government and install a friendly regime. Instead, the invasion had the opposite effect. Rather than collapsing, Iran unified against a foreign enemy. Iran still possessed significant military infrastructure and trained officers left over from the Shah's US-supported armed forces, allowing it to resist effectively. The conflict soon devolved into a brutal war of attrition, often compared to the trench warfare of World War I's Western Front. Both sides targeted civilian areas through aerial bombing campaigns. And Iraq notoriously employed chemical weapons during the war. Iraqi repression also extended the population suspected of disloyalty, including Arabs within Iran who refused to support Baghdad. And Iran also had its fair share of war crimes. You see, Iran during this time was notorious for using child soldiers. Many were used as cannon fodder in Montage-style charges, with many of them being maimed or killed in battle. Boys as young as 9 would be sent to the front lines, often motivated by promises of martyrdom and spiritual reward. In fact, we see in the film that one of Marjane's childhood friends was one of those boy soldiers. This is one of those scenes from the graphic novel that was sadly cut short as it was expanded upon more there. The human cost was catastrophic, as for 8 years from 1980 to 1988, the Iran-Iraq War drawn with neither side achieving decisive gains. Foreign powers fueled the conflict by supplying weapons to both sides. But the most influential and two-faced of them would be the United States, the Soviet Union, and China. The USA and the USSR claimed to support Iraq, and China claimed to support Iran. But in reality, all these nations gave weapons to both sides, thus prolonging the conflict. By the war's end, it's estimated that 1 to 2 million people have been killed, with the war ending in a ceasefire. Ironically, Saddam Hussein's plan to weaken revolutionary Iran instead strengthened its internal unity, while setting the stage of Iraq's own future decline. The Islamic Republic, established after the revolution, remains in power to this day. In recent years, a younger generation of Iranians had increasingly protested against government restrictions, revealing growing internal tensions within Iranian society. There are even those in the Iranian diaspora who want to bring back the monarchy, with the Shah's son, Reza Pahlavi III, want to be reinstated as the said Shah. At the same time, escalating conflicts between Iran, the United States, and Israel have raised renewed fears of war across the region. At the time this video is being made, the supreme ruler of Iran, Ali Khomeini, has been assassinated by the United States and Israel, and has been replaced by his son, Mojtaba. Similar to the Iran-Iraq War, this did not collapse the government, but again united the populace against a foreign enemy that threatens their sovereignty. And this is why the US is so obsessed with Iran. Similar to Cuba, Iran was one of the very few countries that managed to break away from American influence, and the US has been very resentful ever since. Though this does raise an important question: will the Islamic Republic endure, or could it eventually fall as the Shah's regime once did? Persepolis helps us understand the origin of this modern reality, presenting one of the most consequential events in modern history, through the deeply personal perspective of a young woman whose entire world changed in a blink of an eye.
با من و همراه منی چوب الف بر سر ما بغض من و آه منی حق شده اسم من و تو تنه بسیار ترکه بیدار و ستم مونده هنوز رو تن ما دست بی فرهنگی ما هرز تمومه علفاش خوب اگه خوب بد اگه بد مرد دلای آدماش دست من و تو باید این پرده ها رو پاره کنه کی میتونه جز من و تو درد ما رو چاره کنه یار دبستان من با من و همراه منی چوب الف بر سر ما بغض من و آه منی حق شده اسم من و تو رو تنه وقت سیاه پرچه بیداد و ستم مونده هنوز رو تن ما